The little girl didn't run. That was the first thing Park Hee-soon noticed. She walked, steady, deliberate, soaked through her white dress, like she had crossed a river to get here. The gala security parted, not because they let her through. They hadn't. But because by the time anyone registered that a child had slipped past 3 layers of private enforcement into the most exclusive charity event in Manhattan, she was already standing 3 feet from his table, her small fist pressed against the white linen, her eyes locked onto his face like she had memorized it. The room didn't go loud. It went the other kind of quiet. The kind that happens when powerful people don't know what to do next. She opened her hand. A crumpled $5 bill, damp at the edges, flattened itself against the tablecloth. Then she leaned forward, and in a voice so calm it was almost frightening for a child, she said, "Please help my mom. He said you're the only one who can make him stop." Park Hee-soon had sat across from generals, prosecutors, senators, and men who controlled ports. None of them had ever made the room hold its breath the way this child did. He set down his glass. He looked at the bill. He looked at her face. No tears. Not one. Just a kind of urgent precision in her eyes that belonged to someone who had already decided that crying would waste time she didn't have. The man beside him, his chief of staff, Kwon, leaned down slowly. "Sir, security is—" "I see her," Park said. He stood. He was tall enough that it required a deliberate lowering when he knelt to her level, and the room watched him do it. Watched Park Hee-soon, the man who had not knelt for a single living soul in 11 years, press one knee toward the marble floor and look directly at a little girl in a soaked white dress. "What's your name?" he asked. "Imani," she said. "How did you get in here, Imani?" The side door near the kitchen. The man with the earpiece was watching the other way. She said it the way someone reports a fact. No pride, no apology. "My mom doesn't know I'm here. She'd be scared, but I had to come." "Who told you my name?" Her expression shifted, just slightly. The first crack. "He says your name when he hurts her," she said, like it's a threat, like just saying it is supposed to make her stop fighting back. The room didn't breathe. Park Hee-soon looked at the $5 bill on the table. Then he looked back at her. "You brought me your money," he said. "It's all I had. My grandma says you have to pay for help or it doesn't count." Her chin lifted slightly. "Is it enough?" He picked up the bill, folded it once, placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket, directly over his chest. "It's enough," he said. He straightened up. He turned to Kwon and said, in Korean, precisely 4 words. Then he returned to the table, sat down, lifted his glass, and the room, slowly, cautiously, began to breathe again. But his jaw was tight, and his eyes were somewhere else entirely. If that just hit you somewhere in your chest, good. That means you're the right person for this story. Subscribe right now and tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were that little girl's mother? Don't scroll past this. Stay with me. 3 miles east, in a 6th-floor apartment on 118th Street, Cassandra Blake was not sleeping. She was sitting at her kitchen table with a glass of water she hadn't touched, a stack of patient intake files she hadn't opened, and a phone she was watching the way you watch a door you're not sure is locked. The apartment was quiet. Imani's bedroom light was off. Her mother, Rosaline, had gone to bed at 9 after making soup that Cassandra had said was delicious and not touched. She was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix anymore. The kind of tired that settles into the joints, behind the eyes, in the exact center of the chest. The kind you get from holding yourself together with both hands for so long that you've forgotten what relaxed feels like. She was 36 years old. She had a master's degree in healthcare administration. She managed a floor of 42 patients at Northside Elder Care and supervised 11 staff members, and had not once, in 9 months, let a single colleague see the bruise under her left ear, that foundation covered imperfectly under fluorescent lighting. She had not told her supervisor. She had not told her mother the full truth. She had not gone to the police. She had, instead, opened a folder. It lived in a cloud account under a username that had nothing to do with her name. Inside it, screenshots, financial records, text messages, audio files recorded on a device no larger than a thumbnail that she kept clipped to the inside of her work bag. She had been building it for 4 months, quietly, systematically, the way she had been taught to document patient incidents, without emotion, without gaps, with timestamps. Her phone rang. It's a private number. She knew before she answered. "You had a long day, Cassandra." The voice was smooth, in a way that had once seemed charming, and now made her skin tighten. "I heard you stayed late. You should rest." She said nothing. "You should also know," he continued, "that your little documentation project, whatever you think you're building, it disappears the moment I decide it does. You understand that, right? I have people in every system you've touched." Still nothing. "He doesn't know you exist," the voice said. And this time there was something underneath it, something almost boyish, something that needed her to flinch. "You think you can use his name against me? His name protects me, not you." "I'm not using anyone's name," she said. "You should be afraid of me." "Good night, Minjae," she said, and ended the call. She put the phone face down on the table. Then she picked up her glass and finally drank the water. Both hands steady. But Imani's bedroom light was still off, and she had not checked it in 20 minutes. And when she pushed back from the table and walked down the hall and opened the door, and the bed was empty, that was the first time all night that her composure broke. Not because she was dramatic, not because she panicked easily, but because Cassandra Blake, who had survived 9 months of escalating threats from a man with dangerous connections, had one soft place left in her life. One thing she had refused to armor. And that soft place had an empty bed and a folded note on the pillow that said, "I went to find the man who can make him stop. Don't be scared, Mama. I have my $5. Kwan's report came back in 40 minutes. G. Park was still at the gala, present in body, absent everywhere else, when his assistant placed a folded card on the table beside his dessert fork. He opened it without changing expression, read it once, then twice. Then he refolded it with the same precision he used for everything and set it beside his untouched crème brûlée. The name on the card was Minjae Park, his brother Sung-jin's son. Park sat with that for a moment. Around him the gala continued. Crystal glasses, polished speeches, men in suits congratulating each other on charitable generosity they had structured for tax efficiency. Someone was saying his name across the table. He answered correctly without registering the question. Minjae. He had last seen him at his father's funeral 6 years ago. A 23-year-old who had looked at Park across the coffin with an expression that was not grief. He had sent monthly financial support through a trust arrangement, which Minjae had accepted without acknowledgement. He had extended 2 professional opportunities. Both declined. He had assumed, in the clean, efficient way that men who prefer clarity tend to assume, that distance was a choice both of them had agreed to. He had not assumed this. "Kwan," he said quietly. Kwan materialized at his left shoulder. "Sir." "Find him. No spectacle." "And if he resists?" I said no spectacle. "Yes, sir." Park stood. He shook hands with the correct people. He made the correct exit. In the car, he sat in the back with the $5 bill in his hand and said nothing for 12 blocks. Then, the child. Where is she now? With our housekeeper at the secondary residence. She's been fed. She's calm. She's asking if you kept the money. Despite everything. Despite Min Jae's name sitting in his chest like a stone. Despite the particular kind of cold that comes with discovering that someone with your blood has been using your name to terrorize a woman. The corner of his mouth moved, just slightly. Tell her I did, he said. He went to Cassandra Blake's apartment at 11:47 at night, which was not the kind of thing Park Hee-soon did. He did not make unannounced arrivals at private residences. He did not involve himself in situations below a certain operational threshold. He sent people. He received reports. He made decisions from a distance with information that had already been filtered. But the child had placed $5 on his table and looked at him like he was the last responsible adult in her world, and he had put the money over his heart, and that meant something, even to him. The building was a walk-up. 6th floor. No doorman. The kind of building that used to be decent and was still trying. He came alone, which alarmed Kwon sufficiently that Kwon was currently parked across the street running a threat assessment on a residential block in Harlem at midnight, which was, as Kwon privately noted, not what he had signed up for. Park knocked twice. Silence. Then the sound of someone placing themselves just behind the door without opening it. He recognized the quality of that silence. Someone measuring. My name is Park Hee-soon, he said. Your daughter came to find me tonight. The door opened on the chain first. One eye. Then the chain came off and the door opened fully, and Cassandra Blake stood in her doorway in a gray nursing scrubs top and dark slacks, her natural hair pulled back, her expression doing something remarkable, which was nothing. Complete, deliberate nothing. Like she had already rehearsed the version of this moment where she was not startled and had decided to perform it, regardless of the internal situation. She looked at him. He looked at her. She went to the gala, Cassandra said. It wasn't a question. She did. She's safe. She's at my residence, supervised. She asked me to tell you not to be angry. Something moved through Cassandra's face then. Brief, in the particular combination of exhaustion and overwhelming love that parents experience when their child does something that is simultaneously terrifying and absolutely characteristic of exactly who they are. She pressed her lips together for 1 second. Then it was gone. Come in, she said. He stepped inside. The apartment was small but ordered. The kind of clean that isn't performed for guests but is simply a standard. Things in their place, surfaces clear, the smell of Rosaline's soup still in the air. One lamp on in the living room, files on the kitchen table, a glass of water. She did not offer him a seat. She stood in the center of the room and looked at him with the particular directness of someone who has already decided that smallness is not an option tonight. If you came to tell me to stop, she said, you should know I've already documented everything. Financial records, threat logs, recorded audio. I have copies in 3 locations, 2 of which are with people who have instructions to act if they stop hearing from me on a schedule. Park looked at her. If you came to intimidate me, she continued, her voice even and clear, you are approximately 4 months late. I've been living with intimidation since January. I've had time to process it. I didn't come to intimidate you, Park said. Then why did you come? Because your daughter placed $5 on my table and asked me to make him stop. And because the man doing this is my nephew. The room shifted. Not visibly. Nothing in Cassandra's posture changed. But something recalibrated behind her eyes. a rapid clinical reassessment of the situation, of the variables, of what this information meant for everything she had built over 4 months. "You didn't know," she said, not accusatory, just cataloging. "I didn't know." "He uses your name," she said. "He says it specifically, like it's a shield," Park said. "Yes." He stood in her living room and let that sit there between them. The weight of it. His name being used as a weapon against a woman who had done nothing except work in a building where his nephew had decided he had authority. "You said you have financial records," he said. "I do." "He's been laundering through the elder care programs." She looked at him carefully. "You know about that." "I know now." He paused. "Show me." She didn't move immediately. She was deciding something. He could see it. The rapid internal calculation of a woman who had survived by trusting no one and was being asked by the one person with enough power to help her, to trust him. "I've been building that case to take to a federal investigator," she said, "not to hand to the man whose family it implicates." "That's a reasonable position," Park said. But he will destroy it before you reach anyone who matters. He has people in 3 oversight departments I can name right now. Going public without neutralizing him first means you walk into a room with a case, and he walks in behind you with the evidence erased and a counter-narrative already planted. She said nothing. "You've thought of this," he said. "I've thought of nothing else for 4 months," she said. "Then you know that what you've built is extremely dangerous and completely vulnerable." "Yes." "Show me," he said again. "Not to take it from you, to understand what we're working with." The word we sat between them like something neither of them had agreed to yet. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the kitchen table and opened her laptop. They were there for 2 hours. She walked him through it with the same systematic precision she used for everything. Organized chronologically, categorized by type, cross-referenced with facility records and payment timelines. It was, Park noted internally, one of the most methodically assembled pieces of private intelligence he had seen outside of a professional operation. He said so. "I'm a healthcare administrator," she said. "Documentation is the job. You've missed nothing." "I've missed why," she said. "I know what he's doing and how. I don't know why he chose this facility. Why elder care? Why now?" Park was quiet for a moment. "My brother left him in difficult circumstances," he said. "There was money owed across several businesses. When Sung Jin died, those debts became Min Jae's inheritance. He would have looked for something low visibility to move funds through. Elder care is under-audited. The patient population doesn't self-advocate. He would have seen it as clean. He endangered patients," Cassandra said. Her voice was still controlled, but just beneath it something sharpened. "Medication procurement irregularities. 3 patients received incorrect dosage schedules because the supplier records were falsified as part of the laundering structure. I caught it. I corrected it before anyone was hurt, but it was close." Park said nothing. "He almost hurt my patients," she said, "to hide money." The lamp on the table was the only light. Outside, the city made its night sounds. Somewhere in Park's secondary residence, a little girl was probably still awake, asking whether he had kept her $5. "He will be removed from your building by morning," Park said. "He will not return." "That's not enough," Cassandra said. "I know. If he disappears quietly, he does this somewhere else. To someone who doesn't have 4 months of documentation. To someone who doesn't have..." She stopped, looked at him. "To someone whose daughter doesn't know your name." He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them looked away. We need more time, he said, to build this into something that ends him properly. How much time? Weeks, not months. During which time I continue to work in that building and pretend I don't know what I know. During which time, Park said, he will not be able to touch you. She almost said something. He saw it, the reflex of a woman who had spent 9 months depending on no one and had learned, the hard way, that promises made in private rooms at midnight were not the same as safety. She held it back. I need that in writing, she said. He blinked. Once. Excuse me? I need your commitment in writing, a formal protection agreement, documented, signed, dated. She held his gaze without apology. I've been doing this alone for 4 months, because I had nothing that couldn't be dismissed. I will not operate on a verbal agreement from a man I met 2 hours ago, regardless of who he is. The silence stretched. Then Park reached into his jacket and removed a card. He placed it on the table. My private attorney's contact. Call him tomorrow at 9. Tell him I authorized a full protection agreement with full disclosure clause. He paused. That means if I fail to act on what you've shared with me tonight, you retain the right to release everything. Cassandra looked at the card, then at him. You'd sign that? She said. I just offered it. She picked up the card, held it for a moment. Why? Because your daughter paid me $5, he said, and I intend to earn it. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He was nearly at the door when she said, without turning around, he called me tonight. Before you came. He said your name protects him. Park's hand rested on the door frame. It doesn't, he said. I know that now, she said. He left. She stood in her kitchen for a long time after. Then she went to Imani's room and sat on the edge of the empty bed and looked at the note still on the pillow. I went to find the man who can make him stop. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. Then she went back to the table and kept working. Imani Blake was returned to her mother at 6:45 the following morning in a black car that had no visible markings, delivered to the curb outside the building by a driver who handed her a paper bag from a bakery 2 blocks away and said, in very careful English, Mr. Park says breakfast first. Imani walked up the 6 flights holding the bag, and when Cassandra opened the door, her mother looked at her for exactly 2 seconds before pulling her in with both arms, and Imani felt the particular quality of that hug, the kind that is love and terror in the same grip. I found him, Imani said into her mother's shoulder. He kept the $5. Cassandra laughed. It came out slightly broken. You cannot do that again, she said. I know. You understand me? You cannot? I know, Mama. Imani leaned back and looked at her mother's face, at the exhaustion there, at the thing underneath it that was slightly different from last night. Is he going to help? Cassandra looked at her daughter for a long moment, at the absolute certainty in that small face, at the fact that this 8-year-old had done, in one night with $5 and a pair of steady eyes, what Cassandra had been trying to engineer for 4 months. She had created a direct line. We'll see, Cassandra said. He kept the $5, Imani said again, as if this settled the matter entirely. And honestly, looking at her daughter's face, Cassandra found it very difficult to argue with the logic. By 10 that morning, 3 things had happened. Park had spoken to Min Jae. Not in person, not yet. He had sent a message through a channel that Min Jae would understand immediately. A specific financial hold placed on a discretionary account that Min Jae had been using without Park's formal knowledge, which signaled, in the particular language of men who communicate through action rather than conversation, that Park was aware, that the cover story was gone, that the next move was being watched. Or the second thing that happened was that Kwon placed a summary of the elder care facility's ownership structure on Park's desk and waited without speaking while Park read it. The summary revealed that the procurement shell company Min-jae had been using had been partially registered through a holding entity that connected, 3 layers removed, to a board member of Park's own foundation, a man named Director Lim. Kwon watched Park read that section twice. "How long have you known about Lim?" Park asked. "I suspected for approximately 6 weeks," Kwon said. "I had no confirmation until this morning." 6 weeks. "Yes, sir." "You didn't tell me." "I was building confirmation." Park set the summary down. He looked at Kwon. Kwon, who had worked for him for 9 years and who possessed, along with genuine competence and loyalty, in the single most perfectly calibrated expression of professional neutrality that Park had ever encountered. The man could receive news of a building fire with the approximate emotional display of someone being told the conference room was booked. "Are you certain now?" Park asked. "Yes, sir." "Then we have a board member, a nephew, a falsified procurement chain, and a healthcare compliance exposure." "That is an accurate summary, sir." "And 3 weeks before the Foundation's annual audit." 17 days, actually. Park picked up his coffee. "Kwon." "Sir, when I tell you that your timing is occasionally deeply unpleasant, I mean it as a professional observation." Kwon's expression didn't move. "Understood, sir. Get me Director Lim's full financial history from the last 4 years." Park stood. "And find out if Min-jae has made any contact with the board since yesterday." "Already running." "And send breakfast to Dr. Blake's address." He paused. "Something Korean, and something she might actually want. Ask her daughter." There was a pause that, for Kwon, counted as visible reaction. "You want me to ask the 8-year-old? She seems to know what she's doing," Park said. The third thing that happened was that Min-jae Park sat in a rented office in Midtown, looked at his phone, and understood that the account hold was not administrative. He was 29 years old and had, since the age of 17, carried a specific version of his uncle in his mind. The version that had sat across from his father's coffin without crying, that had sent money without conversation, that had structured his absence as generosity. He had spent 12 years building something in that absence, not out of ambition exactly, more out of the particular kind of need that grows in people who were told, by the shape of their circumstances, that they didn't count for much. He had used the name. He knew that. He had used it the way you use the shadow of something large when you are not large yourself. Not to deceive exactly, but to borrow height you haven't earned. But the account hold meant his uncle was no longer a shadow. He was a presence. Min-jae put his phone down and looked at the window. Midtown traffic, gray morning. The particular kind of silence that isn't quiet at all. He thought about Cassandra Blake and her documentation, and her steady voice, and the fact that she had, somehow, in all the months he had been pressuring her, never once broken in the way he expected people to break. He thought about the child. He picked his phone back up. There were people he could call. People who operated in spaces that Park Hee-soon's moral recalibration did not reach. People who could make documentation disappear, and women recant, and children become irrelevant. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he put the phone back down. Not because he had chosen well, but because he was not yet certain that he had chosen at all. That uncertainty would not last long. Cassandra called the attorney at 9:02. He was expecting her. He was efficient, professional, and did not seem surprised by any of the terms. The protection agreement was thorough, and the full disclosure clause, the one that gave her the right to release everything if Park failed to act, He was not the provision of a man trying to control her. It was the provision of someone who understood that she needed the leverage to stay. She signed it at 11:15 at a notary 3 blocks from the hospital, where she was due for a 12 o'clock shift. She arrived at work at 12:01, made her rounds, managed her floor, supervised her staff, and at 2:15 received a message on her personal phone that said only, "Account hold placed on the procurement entity. Your patient records are being quietly corrected through a compliance audit I've initiated with an external firm. It won't trace back to you." She read it once, then again. She put her phone in her pocket, walked to the small supply room off the second corridor, stood inside it for approximately 30 seconds, and allowed herself, in private, alone, without audience, to feel something close to relief. Then she walked back out and finished her shift. Park did not see her for 3 days. He did not call. He had people watching the building, watching Min Jae's movements, watching Director Lim's communication channels. He received daily summaries. He made daily decisions. The operation proceeded with the kind of controlled precision that his people were trained for. Invisible, clean, no spectacle. On the 3rd evening, a food delivery arrived at Cassandra's apartment from a restaurant that she had not ordered from. The bag contained 2 containers. One was a Korean soup, gamjatang, pork bone, rich and warming, the kind that is comfort food in the specific sense of being something a person makes when someone they care about is cold. The other container held a fried plantain dish from a Jamaican restaurant 2 avenues over that Imani had apparently recommended with significant conviction when Kwon, in a professional low point he would not discuss with colleagues, had called to ask. Cassandra stood at her kitchen counter and looked at both containers for a long moment. He had not assumed. He had not decided for her. He had sent 2 things from 2 different places and let her choose, or have both, or neither. She sat down at the table and ate both. Rosaline appeared from the bedroom, looked at the containers, looked at her daughter's face, and sat down across from her without saying anything. "The situation is being handled," Cassandra said. Rosaline looked at the 2 containers again, at the care implicit in the combination, at her daughter's face, which was doing the thing it did when Cassandra was being deliberately private about something emotional. Rosaline said. "It's a professional arrangement, Mama. The man sent you Korean soup and Jamaican plantain at 10 o'clock at night. He asked Imani what I liked." Rosaline was quiet for a moment. "He asked the child." "Yes. A man who controls things worth more money than I can count, and he asked an 8-year-old what her mother eats." Cassandra said nothing. Rosaline said again, and went back to bed. Cassandra sat at the table and put her fork down, and looked at the container that still held the soup. Then she looked at the wall for a while, at nothing in particular. Then she picked up her fork and finished eating. On the 4th day, Director Lim sent a message to Min Jae that said, "The uncle is asking questions. We need to accelerate." And the situation, which had been moving toward resolution at a controlled pace, changed. Min Jae received Lim's message at 7 in the morning, and by 8, he had made 3 calls that Park's surveillance team logged, flagged, and delivered to Kwon's desk by 8:45. Kwon read the transcript summary. Then, he called Park. Park was in the middle of a board preparation meeting when his personal phone lit up with Kwon's name. He excused himself with the particular seamlessness of a man who has been excusing himself from rooms his entire professional life. Smooth, unhurried, already thinking about the next thing before the door closed behind him. "Talk," he said. "Min Jae contacted 2 people outside our known network," Kwon said. One is a media consultant who specializes in reputation management, specifically in building counter-narratives ahead of a story breaking. The second contact is someone in the Immigration Compliance Office for the Northeastern District. Park was still. Cassandra's mother, Rosaline Blake, Jamaican national, green card holder, renewal pending since March. The timing of the contact is not coincidental. Park said nothing for 3 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had not changed in any way that someone who didn't know him would detect. "Freeze it," he said. "Whatever Lim and Min Jae are planning to trigger against her renewal, freeze it before it moves. Already working on it. There's more. Go." The media consultant. He's already been given a package. You have photos of you leaving Dr. Blake's building from the first night. The framing they're building is that she came to you, not the reverse. That she is leveraging the investigation for personal benefit. That the documentation she holds was fabricated as leverage, not gathered as evidence. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of silence that has a great deal of activity happening inside it. "They're going to make her the story," Park said. "Yes, sir. Opportunist. Gold digger. Using her daughter as access. The full architecture. And they'll release it ahead of any formal action so that whatever she brings forward is already contaminated by public perception." When? The consultant typically moves within 72 hours of receiving a package. Then we have less than that. Park turned and looked at the city through the corridor window. Who else on the board knows about Lim? I believe 2 others have been aware and silent. Complicity rather than active participation, but silent complicity in a healthcare fraud case is not a minor thing. "No," Park said. "It isn't." He paused. "Get me everything on the media consultant, and I want to know who took those photographs." "Already pulling." "Kwan." "Sir." "She doesn't know about this yet." "No, sir. I'm telling her today." There was the briefest pause. "Would you like me to arrange a location?" "No," Park said. "I'll go to her." He went back into the board meeting, sat down, and completed the next 40 minutes with the precision of someone who has learned to operate in 2 places at once. Present in the room, entirely elsewhere in his mind, and showing neither. Cassandra was finishing a patient review when her supervisor knocked on her office door frame and said, with the studied casualness of someone delivering something they found confusing, "There's a man downstairs asking for you. He said to tell you it's about the agreement." She closed the file. "I'll be right down." Park was in the lobby, which was the kind of unremarkable institutional lobby that large medical facilities produce. Beige walls, generic seating, a reception desk staffed by someone who was currently trying very hard to appear as though the person standing near the window was not unusual in any way that she would definitely be texting about later. He was in a dark coat, no tie. He looked like himself, which was to say he looked like someone who occupied space with the kind of quiet authority that didn't require announcement. He also looked, Cassandra thought as she crossed the lobby, like someone who was carrying something and had decided to carry it correctly. Straight, controlled, but carrying it nonetheless. "There's a conference room on the 2nd floor," she said when she reached him. "Follow me." She led him upstairs without small talk, closed the door, turned around. "Tell me," she said. He told her. All of it. The media consultant, the photograph package, the immigration angle against her mother, Lim's acceleration message, the 72-hour window. He told it in sequence, without minimizing, without the particular kind of reassuring softening that people sometimes apply to bad news to make themselves more comfortable delivering it. He gave it to her straight. She stood at the end of the conference table and listened. Her hands were flat on the table surface. Her face was doing the nothing again. The deliberate, controlled nothing. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "They're going to make Imani part of it," she said. "The story about me using my daughter for access. Yes, she's 8 years old. I know." The nothing cracked. Not dramatically, not tears, not volume, but something moved through her face that was older and heavier than anger. In the specific grief of a mother who has been careful, so careful, and has watched that carefulness become insufficient. "I need to move my mother," she said. "Already handled. Her renewal file has been flagged through a compliance review that will suspend any action on it for a minimum of 90 days, long enough to resolve this through proper channels." She looked at him. "You did that before you came here." "Yes, before you told me. I did what needed to be done immediately. Then I came to tell you." She thought about that. He watched her think about it. The way she processed information, the slight movement at the corner of her eye when she was recalibrating. "That could be read as you making decisions about my family without consulting me," she said. "It could," he said. "It was also the only way to protect your mother within the window we had." Another pause. "Thank you," she said. It came out even, direct, with nothing extra attached to it. Just that. He nodded. "The photographs," she said, "from the first night. We're identifying the source. Someone inside my building, paid externally. Lim. Almost certainly." She pulled out a chair and sat down, not from weakness, but from the deliberate choice to think, sitting rather than standing. She put both hands together on the table. "The media story is the most dangerous piece," she said, "because once it's out, it doesn't matter what the evidence shows. People will look at a black woman who has contact with a wealthy Korean man, and they will fill in the narrative themselves without reading the details." "Yes," Park said. "So we need to be ahead of it." "Yes." "Which means we need to move faster than 72 hours. "Yes." She looked at him. "What are you prepared to do?" He sat down, across from her at the table, and they did what they had done 4 nights ago at her kitchen table. They worked. They were in the conference room for 90 minutes. 2 members of her staff knocked and retreated without comment. The receptionist from the lobby texted 3 people. When they finished, the outline was clear. Park would move against Lim before the media package was released, not through confrontation, but through a formal foundation audit, triggered by him, which would immediately place Lim's board activities under institutional scrutiny and make any story Lim helped plant look retaliatory rather than factual. Cassandra's documentation would be formally handed to an external investigator, not police, who could be reached, but a federal healthcare compliance authority that operated independently of the city systems Min-jae had access to, and the photographs of Park leaving her building. "Let them release the photographs," Cassandra said. Park looked at her. "That's the piece designed to destroy your credibility." "I know. Release them anyway." She held his gaze. "Because if we try to suppress the photographs, and they come out anyway, it looks like concealment. If they come out in a controlled way with a clear factual timeline attached. He arrived at my home after my daughter came to his event. I showed him documented evidence of a crime. He acted on it. Then the photographs tell a different story. The story they're building assumes the viewer won't look at the timeline. A lot of viewers won't," she said, "but enough will. And the ones who matter. The investigators, the board, the people who make institutional decisions, they will look. They always do." She paused. "You said I've built something solid. Solid things hold up when you shine light on them. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not surprise, exactly. More like the specific quality of attention someone gives a thing they have underestimated and are now reassessing in real time. "You're suggesting we release our own version first," he said. "I'm suggesting we don't spend energy hiding things that aren't shameful," she said. "You came to my apartment to address a crime being committed by your family member. That's what happened. I'm not ashamed of it. Are you?" He said after a moment. "No." "Then we don't act like it." It was at precisely this point that Kwon called. Park answered, listened for 45 seconds, and when he lowered the phone, his expression had shifted into something that was harder to read than usual. "What happened?" Cassandra asked. "Min-jae has moved." Park set the phone on the table. "He's contacted 2 journalists directly, not through the media consultant, directly. He's offering to give them a story about internal foundation corruption. He's framing himself as the whistleblower." Cassandra stared. "He's going to claim he was the one exposing the fraud. He's going to claim that I knew about Lim, that I was protecting the laundering operation to maintain political alliances, and that he was building a case against me from inside." Park said it flatly, the way someone reads a document they find deeply objectionable. "He will use your documentation against you. Claim you were an operative I planted inside the facility to gather evidence to use against him before he could expose me." The room was quiet. "That's actually quite sophisticated," Cassandra said. "Yes. He's been planning this version for a while. It was always the backup," Park said. "If the pressure didn't work and you didn't break, this was the alternative. Turn the whole situation inside out. Make himself the victim." "It only works," Cassandra said slowly, "if the story breaks before the formal investigation begins, before my documentation is in official hands, and before your audit of Lim is on record." She paused. "How much time do we have?" "Hours, not days." She stood up. "Then we don't wait until tomorrow for the federal filing. I call the compliance authority today, right now. They'll need the full documentation package. I have it." She was already reaching for her phone. "I have it in 3 places. I can have it transmitted in 20 minutes. She looked at him. "You trigger the foundation audit in the same window. Simultaneously. So that when his story breaks, there is already a formal process on record that predates it." She was moving now, precise and fast. "He can claim whatever he wants. The paper trail doesn't care about his narrative." Park watched her for a moment. Then he stood too. "Kwon," he said into the phone, which he had apparently never fully disconnected. "Initiate the foundation audit, effective immediately. Lim is to be notified through formal channels only." He paused. "And find Min-jae. I want to speak to him before anything else breaks." She made the filing in 18 minutes from the conference room, with the documentation transmitted in encrypted packets to the Federal Healthcare Compliance Office, while Park stood near the window with his back to her, on his own calls, doing his part of it. She had imagined, in the 4 months she had been building this alone, what it would feel like when it finally moved. She had imagined relief. She had imagined something releasing in her chest. What she actually felt was very awake, precise, like every decision in the last months had been pointed at this moment, and now the moment was here, and there was no room for anything that wasn't clarity. When she finished, she set her phone down and looked at her hands. Steady. "Done," she said. Park ended his call, turned from the window, looked at her. "Done," he said. They were standing at opposite ends of the conference room table, and neither of them moved for a moment, and the city outside was doing all its city things, indifferent to any of it, And Cassandra thought about Imani's note on the pillow, about Rosaline's knowing silence over 2 containers of food, about 4 months of documentation, built in the margins of 12-hour shifts and sleepless nights. "It might still get messy," she said. "It will get messy," Park said. "But the foundation holds." "The foundation holds," he agreed. She picked up her phone. "I need to get back to my floor," she said. "Of course." She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "You should know," she said, "that I am not going to make this easy for you." He looked at her with that particular stillness. "I don't expect easy," he said. "I mean professionally. The foundation reform. The elder care compliance restructuring. When this is over and you rebuild that board, I intend to be part of the oversight structure. Not as a favor, not as compensation, as someone qualified." He held her gaze. "I would expect nothing less," he said. She left. He stood in the conference room for a moment after she was gone. Then the corner of his mouth moved, just slightly, in the way it had when Quan told him Imani wanted to know if he'd kept the $5. Then he called Quan back and told him to find his nephew. He found Min Jae himself. Not through the address his team provided. Min Jae had already left the Midtown office by the time they reached it, but through a location that Park had known about for 6 years and had never used. A small apartment in Flushing that had belonged to Sung Jin, Min Jae's father. Park had been paying the rent on it since the funeral, not because Min Jae had asked, because it was the one place his brother had loved that hadn't been repossessed, and Park had paid for it the way he had sent money and made professional introductions, without words, without requiring acknowledgement, as if the action could replace the conversation they had never been able to have. Min Jae was there. He opened the door and looked at his uncle, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Min Jae stepped back, and Park walked in. The apartment was small, a few pieces of furniture, a photograph on the shelf, Sung Jin, young, before everything. Park looked at it. Then he sat down. Min Jae remained standing. He was 29 and looked, in this moment, simultaneously older and much younger than that. There was defiance in his posture and something else underneath it that he was clearly working hard to keep underneath. "The journalists," Park said, "don't. It's already. I know what's already. I'm telling you, don't." Park's voice was even, not raised, not theatrical, the particular calm that is more sobering than anger, because it leaves nowhere to redirect. "It won't work. The formal investigation is already on record. The audit is initiated. What you send those journalists now is not a whistleblower story. It's a desperate man trying to outrun accountability." Min Jae's jaw tightened. "You think this is only about the money?" "I think this started before the money," Park said. "I think the money was how you built something in the space I left empty." He paused. "That's on me." Something shifted in Min Jae's face. He hadn't expected that. "Your father and I—" Park stopped, started again. "I made choices that cost Sung Jin more than I understood at the time. By the time I understood, he was gone. I sent money because I didn't know how to send anything else." He looked at his nephew. "That was insufficient. I know that." Min Jae said nothing. His hands had stopped moving. "But what you did in that facility," Park continued, "endangered patients, elderly people who were someone's parents, someone's grandparents. You used them as a transaction, and a woman with a child nearly lost everything, trying to correct the damage quietly, without destroying herself in the process." His voice didn't change. "Whatever your grievance with me, they were not part of it." Min Jae looked at the floor. "Don't send the journalists," Park said. "Not because it will fail, though it will, but because it's the last decision you can still make that isn't entirely unrecoverable. The silence went on for a while. "What happens to me?" Min-jae said. His voice was lower. "The investigation happens. You cooperate. Lim takes the structural weight of it, because his role was primary. Your cooperation changes what your exposure looks like." Park paused. "I won't disappear it, but I won't abandon you in it either." "Why?" "Because your father was my brother," Park said. "You and I am done making choices I can't undo." Min-jae sat down, slowly. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the photograph of Sung-jin on the shelf. Park looked at it too. They sat like that for a while. Two men in a dead man's apartment, with the weight of everything between them, in a city that didn't pause for any of it. "He was angry at you," Min-jae said eventually. "My father." "I know. But he talked about you." A pause. "More than he talked about most things." Park said nothing. "I hated that," Min-jae said, "that he couldn't just hate you cleanly." "Neither could I," Park said. "Now, right now, I need to stop for a moment. Because what just happened in that apartment is the kind of scene that doesn't get written about enough. Two men, no performance, in just the wreckage of a family, and the first honest conversation they should have had a decade ago. And I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever been in a situation where someone hurt you, or someone you love, and you later found out the whole story was more complicated than you knew? Where the person you held responsible was also carrying something you didn't see? I'm not asking you to excuse what Min-jae did. What he did to Cassandra and those patients was not excusable. But that moment in the apartment, I want to know how it landed for you. Leave your answer in the comments. Have you ever had to hold complexity like that? Have you ever had to separate the crime from the wound underneath it? The comment section is going to be filled with women who have lived through versions of this. Go read what they're saying. You might see yourself there. The media package never went out. Min-jae called the journalists back within the hour, told them he had no comment, told the media consultant the arrangement was terminated. Then he called Kwan's number, which Park had left on the table when he stood to leave, and said, in the careful voice of someone dismantling something they built, "Tell me what cooperation looks like." Director Lim found out about the Foundation audit at 3 in the afternoon through a formal board notification. He called Park's office 4 times. Park did not take the calls. He sent a single written response through the Foundation's legal team. All inquiries should be directed to the External Audit Committee. Lim called 2 of the other board members. One of them, a woman named Director Choi, who had been silent for 6 weeks and was now evidently done being silent, picked up the phone and called the Audit Committee directly and offered to provide supplementary documentation. The foundation, which had taken 11 years to build, was being cleaned from the inside in the span of a single afternoon. The cost of it was visible in everything. In the political alliance that sent a terse withdrawal message at 4:45. In the multi-million-dollar development deal, whose lead investor called to express concern. In the 3 board members who would need to be replaced. In the reputation work that would take months. Park sat with the cost of it. He didn't minimize it. He had built the foundation with specific intent, not purely for power, though power had always been part of it, but to maintain something that his family had never had. Stability, permanence, the ability to be the last thing standing when everything else moved. He was dismantling pieces of that now, deliberately. For a woman he had known for less than 2 weeks, and a child who had walked into his gala with $5 and steady eyes. He thought about what Cassandra had said in the conference room. Survival isn't the same as integrity. He thought about the version of himself that had sat across from his brother's coffin and not cried. That had sent money, without words, for 6 years. That had built walls and called them foundations. He picked up his phone. "I need to speak at the board meeting tomorrow," he said to Kwan. "Full board. I'll be making an announcement about the investigation and about the future governance structure." "Sir," Kwan said, in the tone of a man who has been managing the fallout from a very eventful 48 hours. "The political implications of a public announcement. I know the implications. The alliance withdrawal alone. I know, Kwan." A pause. "Yes, sir," Kwan said. "Full board. Tomorrow." She found out about the announcement not from Park, but from a colleague who sent her a link to a financial news alert at 7 that evening that read, "Park Foundation, CEO to address board amid internal investigation. Political alliance withdrawals, signal significant restructuring." Cassandra sat on her couch and read it 3 times. Imani was at the kitchen table doing homework. Rosaline was watching something in her room. The apartment was quiet. She put the phone down, looked at her hands, thought about a man who had shown up at her door at midnight, who had told her about the media package before neutralizing it, who had ordered soup from one place and plantain from another and let her choose, who had sat across from his nephew in a dead man's apartment and said the things that should have been said 10 years ago. She thought about the agreement she had signed, the disclosure clause, the protection architecture she had insisted on building before she would trust him with anything. She picked up her phone and texted a number she had not initiated contact with before. The text said, "I saw the news alert. You didn't have to make it public." The response came 4 minutes later. "Yes, I did." She looked at that for a while. Then she typed, "The board meeting tomorrow. I'd like to be there." His response, "You should be." She put the phone down. From the kitchen, Imani said, without looking up from her homework, "Is that the man who kept my $5? "Do your homework," Cassandra said. "I'm doing it." A pause. "Is it, though?" Cassandra looked at the ceiling. "Yes." Imani went back to her homework without further comment, but there was something in the quality of her silence that bore a strong resemblance to Rosaline's and Cassandra had the distinct impression that the women in her household had already reached conclusions she was still in the process of approaching. The board meeting was not gentle. Park stood at the head of the table and said, in the measured and precise language of someone who has decided that clarity is more important than comfort, that the foundation had been subject to internal financial misconduct involving a procurement shell structure, that a board member, Director Lim, who was not present, having apparently decided that morning that urgent travel was necessary, had been complicit in that structure, that the foundation's political alliances had been compromised by that complicity, and that the investigation was now in formal federal hands. He said it without softening. He said his nephew's name. He said Lim's name. He did not distribute blame into abstraction. 2 board members tried to interrupt. He let them speak. Then he continued. When he was finished, a man at the far end of the table, older, one of the founding members, a man who had known Park for 20 years, said, "You understand what this costs?" "Yes," Park said. "The alliance withdrawal alone. I understand. Blood protects blood, he soon. That's how we've operated." Park looked at him. "Blood is not immunity," he said. "Not in my foundation, not while I'm running it." The room was quiet. Cassandra, seated along the side wall in the observer capacity she had requested and Park had authorized, watched the room absorb it, watched the faces recalibrate, the ones who were relieved, the ones who were calculating new risk, the ones who were simply absorbing the fact that the man they had followed for 20 years had just chosen principle over dynasty in front of witnesses. Director Choi, who had submitted supplementary documentation the previous afternoon, looked at Cassandra once. A brief, direct look. Something that acknowledged, without words, that women who build cases quietly in difficult circumstances recognize each other. Cassandra held her gaze and nodded slightly. Afterward, the room cleared in stages. Park was occupied with the legal team. Cassandra stood near the window and watched the city and thought about all the ways this could still go sideways. The investigation had months to run. Min Jae's cooperation was genuine, but its durability was unproven. The political fallout would have consequences she couldn't yet map, and there were at least 2 board members who had left that room in a posture that suggested they weren't finished. She was still thinking about this when Park appeared beside her. They stood at the window together. Below them, Manhattan continued its indifferent operations. 2 of them will work against you from the outside, she said. I know. The political alliance withdrawal will create pressure on the development deal. I know. You'll need to rebuild the board quickly. The governance structure has to be airtight, or the investigation findings will be challenged on procedural grounds. He was looking at her with that expression again, the one she was beginning to recognize. Are you advising me? He said. I'm thinking out loud. Dr. Blake. She looked at him. You said, in the conference room, that when this is over, you intend to be part of the oversight structure. He held her gaze. The board is going to have gaps. I intend to fill them with people who cannot be bought, and who understand what happened here. He paused. The healthcare compliance seat is being restructured as an independent position. Full authority. Reports directly to the executive level. She looked at him for a long moment. That's a real offer. I don't make the other kind, he said. It would require me to navigate a board that currently sees me as the reason their alliances fell apart. Yes. And the media story about opportunism hasn't fully died yet. No. And I would need the position to be independent, in fact, not in structure only. I won't sit in a seat that can be overruled when the findings are inconvenient. That's the structure I'm building, he said, not the one I'm offering you. She looked back at the window, at the city, at all of it. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I asked. 3 weeks later, Min Jae Park entered a cooperation agreement with the federal investigation. Director Lim was formally removed from the foundation board and faced a separate proceeding on the financial misconduct charges. 2 other board members resigned ahead of the audit findings. Director Choi was named acting chair of the restructured governance committee. The media story about Cassandra, the opportunist narrative that Min Jae had tried to plant, ran in one outlet with significantly less traction than intended, primarily because, by the time it published, the formal investigation findings had already established a factual timeline that the narrative couldn't survive contact with. 2 journalists who had received Min Jae's original package ran fact checks instead of the story. One of them called Cassandra for comment. She gave them the timeline and 3 documents, and nothing else. The story that ran, in the end, was not about a woman exploiting a powerful man. It was about a healthcare administrator who had built a federal case from inside a compromised facility while protecting her patients and her family and herself simultaneously for 4 months, largely alone. A colleague from the hospital texted her after it published, "I had no idea you were doing all of that." She texted back, "I know," and that was enough. She accepted the position on a Thursday, called the attorney who had drafted the protection agreement, told him to archive it rather than close it, and then went to Park's office and sat across from him, and they spent 2 hours going through the governance restructuring documentation. It was not a romantic scene. It was two people working, with full coffee. Yi Quan, appearing periodically with materials, and then disappearing again, with the smooth efficiency of someone who had made peace with the direction this was heading. At one point, Park said, about a clause in the oversight provision, "This needs to be broader." "It's already broad," she said. "It needs to cover procurement at every tier, not just primary contracts. If you make it that broad, you'll have compliance teams reviewing mid-level purchasing decisions, and the operational drag will. The operational drag is less costly than another Minjae," he said. She looked at him. He was right. She wrote the revision. He was looking at her when she looked back up. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. He looked back at his documents. She looked at hers. Quan, who had been in the room for that exchange, he filed it in the same mental folder as the two food containers and went back to his work without expression. It was a quiet evening. The city was doing its post-rain thing. Clean air, wet streets, the particular kind of light that happens after a storm when everything is still settling. He took her to the roof of the building. Not dramatic, not staged. He said there was something he wanted to show her. A view of the city from the restructured foundation's new office space. The kind of thing that mattered when you were deciding whether a place was worth building inside. She came because the workday had finished and the city looked like itself, and she had discovered over the past weeks, someone who found it genuinely difficult to say no to the view from a high place. They stood at the railing. Below them, Manhattan spread out in its ridiculous abundance. Lights and water and the ongoing negotiation between the city and the dark. He said, without preamble, the way he said most things, "I cannot promise you a gentle world." She looked at him. "There will be more board members who resent your presence. More media attempts. The political fallout from this will take 2 years to fully settle." He paused. "The man I was before Imani walked into that gala. He would have handled all of this differently. Cleaner, without cost." "You mean without integrity?" she said. "Yes." He looked at the city. "What I am now is more expensive." She was quiet. "But I am not going to make you invisible in my world," he said. "That I can promise." She looked at him for a long moment. At his profile. At the controlled, steady quality of him, and the thing underneath it that she had been watching emerge in small moments for weeks. Over a conference table, in a dead man's apartment, at a board meeting, over documents and cold coffee, and the ongoing argument they seemed to be perpetually engaged in about governance structures. "I was never invisible," she said. Something moved in his face. "I know that now," he said. "You learned to see," she said. He turned and looked at her directly. The full weight of his attention, which was, she had come to understand, not a small thing. "Stand with me," he said, "not behind me." She looked at him for another moment, at the city behind him, at all the cost and the clarity and the ongoing work of it. "I already am," she said. The framed $5 bill appeared in Park's office on a Monday morning. He didn't ask who had arranged it. He had a suspicion, later confirmed, that Imani had requested it specifically, had gone to Rosaline, who had gone to Cassandra, who had looked at the request and said, after a moment, "All right." It sat on the wall between two pieces of art that had been selected by consultants and cost a combined amount that would have purchased the building Cassandra lived in, and it was the only thing in the room that Park actually looked at. Imani came to the office once with Cassandra on a Saturday when the building was quiet. She walked directly to the frame and examined it with the focus of someone inspecting important documentation. "You kept it," she said. "I said I would," Park said. She looked at him. "Was it enough?" He looked at the $5 bill, at the gala, and the rain, and the marble floor, and the room going silent, and a child with no tears, and everything that had followed from that single moment of a child deciding that the world could be moved if you walked to the right person and asked clearly enough. "It was the most expensive lesson I've ever learned," he said. "And yes, it was enough." Imani nodded, satisfied, and went to bother Kwan, who bore it with the expression of a man who had survived significantly worse. Cassandra stood in the doorway and looked at Park, and then at the framed bill, and then back at him. He looked at her. "Don't be smug," she said. "I'm not smug," he said. "You have a very smug expression." "That's just my face." She walked away. He heard her telling Imani not to touch anything on Kwan's desk. He heard Kwan say, with perfect professionalism, that it was quite all right. He heard Imani ask Kwan if he wanted to see a magic trick. He sat down at his desk. Outside, the city was being itself, relentless, indifferent, ongoing. In the hallway, his staff moved through their work. The restructured foundation board met on Tuesday. The federal investigation continued its process. His phone lit up with a message from a contact in a rival Korean business faction. 3 words: "We are watching." He looked at it for a moment. Then he set the phone face down on the desk. The work was not finished. It was not going to be finished. That was the nature of things built to last. They required constant tending, constant defense, constant choice about what they stood for. He picked up the governance document he and Cassandra had been revising, found the clause they had argued about, read it again. She had been right about the operational drag. He had been right about the exposure risk. The revision they'd landed on was better than either of their original positions. He made a note in the margin and put it in the folder for Tuesday. This is what this channel is built for. Stories that ask something real of you. If this one stayed with you, if you felt Cassandra's 4 months of silence, if you felt what it cost Park to choose correctly, then you already belong here. Subscribe. Leave 1 word in the comments that describes what this story gave you. And share it with 1 woman who needs to hear that her quiet strength is not invisible. It never was. Leave a comment and tell me. Was Park right to go public? Should he have protected the family quietly and handled it internally? Or was transparency the only path worth walking? The $5 that changed an empire is now on the wall. And somewhere in this city, a little girl knows that clear eyes and the right question can move things that look immovable. We'll see you in the next story.